What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the podcast. This is Susie. I'm Nate.
And we're very excited to have you here.
And we are in nature because this is our safari-themed episode. We are going to do a little walkabout into the woods and show you the wildlife and nature of California.
What's that scary movie where they like go into the woods with the cameras?
Without a paddle?
The Blair Witch.
Blair Witch. We're doing the Blair Witch Project, and you're going to love it, but this time it's gay. It's gay. This is the gay Blair Witch Project, and it's going to blow your mind. It's crazy. So join us for another episode of a horror podcast with Nate and Susie. So no, we just, our normal venue didn't work out, so we're in nature, and maybe you'll like this better. Yeah. Let us know. Let us know in the comments.
Well,
Do you
and
like
the
nature,
listeners...
Nate, and Nature Susie?
Wow. Okay, I like
That's
that.
a honey brand.
It's the granola. Granola Nate, granola
This is
Susie.
granola episode. We're going to wear more hippie clothes next time, and we're going to go full granola, and maybe you like us better.
I'm kind of hoping that for the people who just listen, that the birds are chirping, and it feels like an ASMR, nature experience. It's
soothing.
Yeah.
You're getting relaxed listening to us. Normally, I don't relax people. I stress them out. Today, we're relaxing you. So on this episode today, we are super excited to have Simon Kent Fung, and he has made, I think, directed, written, produced the podcast, created Dear Alana. And I personally cried while listening to this podcast. I was at work, doing spreadsheets and stuff, and listening to the podcast in the background, and I'm just crying at work, hoping no one's watching me, because this story it wrecked me. It's really important to hear and important to get out there. So without further ado, welcome to the podcast, Simon.
Thank you. Thanks both.
Yeah, would love to listen to how you got started on this project. What led you to want to do this story, to tell Alana's story?
Yeah, and what is a little bit of what the story is?
Yeah, so thanks for having me. So my name is Simon Kent Fung. I am from, all over the place, but been in the San Francisco Bay Area for the last decade. But my journey towards making this podcast really began in 2019. And that was when I was in a coffee shop and I was, scrolling through my phone, and I bumped into the story of this young woman from Boulder, Colorado, who had died by suicide at the age of 24. And, from the reporting and some of the information that was shared about her life, it was really striking to me. She had been this, vibrant, young person, ultimate Frisbee champ, into, a writer, an artist, a songwriter. And she had this unusual adolescence where she had dreamed of becoming a nun since she was about 14 years old, and had chosen to try to pursue that way of life. But she kept the secret, and that secret was that she was gay, and she had come out to her priest when she was a teenager. And he told her not to tell her parents that information. And through other mentors in her life, spiritual mentors in her life, she was directed to conversion therapy, and that led her down a path which resulted in a lot of things which ended in tragedy for her. When I read this, I was extremely disturbed in many ways because of the parallels to my own life. I had dreamed of becoming a Catholic priest when I was a teenager, into my 20s, and I also pursued conversion therapy on my own in order to follow that vocation and that calling, and spent most of my 20s in various forms of conversion therapy. And so that was kind of the background that I brought to it, and that's why her story resonated with me. And so I was immediately stunned, and I remember just sobbing in the corner of this coffee shop, and I ended up trying to find as much information as I could about her, and found her family on social media, and reached out to her mother, sent her an email, and just shared my own story, and shared my condolences, obviously, and wasn't expecting any kind of reply at all. And what happened was, a few months later, she did reply, and we ended up getting on the phone, myself and Alana's mother, and we ended up just reflecting on her life and having this conversation that resulted in many more over the course of the next year and a half. And so fast forward to 2021, and I had just kind of, it was post-COVID. I'd kind of burned out of my job. I took some time off to kind of regather, and I was lying awake in bed it was like in August of 2021, and it was like 2 a.m. and I just, Alana's story kept on haunting me. I was just like, I felt like there were so many still unanswered questions, and I wanted to know what was, what really happened to her. And so the thought came to maybe document that process and do that and explore that in audio. And so I, called up her family and their attorney and just kind of, shared this idea, and they were very supportive, and they kind of opened up their doors and their life to me to learn more about Alana. And that led to the, nearly 2-year journey after that point to make this podcast. And so Dear Alana is really a kind of, collection of that time of learning about Alana. Her family was really generous in giving me access to all of Alana's belongings, her computer, her emails, her phone, but more, probably dramatically, she left behind nearly 24 journals. And so I had the privilege of being able to read those writings, and the reflections that Alana left behind really were the basis of the story.
That's beautiful.
Wow.
I'm like so curious about reading the journals, like that. At least for me, when I'm journaling, it's like the most private area of my life where I'm just unfiltered. And, I have a joke with my friends where it's like, if I ever pass, like, you burn those journals, like nobody gets to read them. And
Except me.
No. And to read something so intimate, what does that do to you as a person, as a creator, as somebody who was so deep in his faith? I'm so curious.
Yeah. I mean, I would say, I had learned about the journals through her family when, they had discovered them as well, towards the end of Alana's life. And, there were a lot of things that were going on in her life in the last few years. She was hospitalized, and so her family ended up discovering these journals as well. And so I'd known about them, but I had never actually read them personally. And part of that was also because like you said, journals are so personal and private, and there was like a real ethical dilemma as far as whether or not it's right to be able to read someone else's journals, and this was a conversation that I was continuously having with her family about, and they, I think, ultimately felt like, this was a part of her legacy they wanted to preserve. And also, as I was reading, them, Alana, expressed at some point, and I talk about this a little bit in the podcast, there was a few lines where she writes about how, all her life she's been wanting to be seen, and that she hopes that maybe someone reading this will, help, we'll be able to see her. And it was a real kind of poignant moment where I was like, oh my God, like, I wonder if she had a sort of sense that maybe this was something that, would be left behind. And so, wrestling with all of that really led me to really approach this with a lot of care as far as, privacy and discretion and what was shared. And so I really hope that I was able to do that justice. But yeah, I think it was a delicate process, a real privilege. And more than that, Alana expressed in words things that I felt and didn't have words for, around the strange conflicts that we find ourselves when we're actively, desperately trying to love and please God and be good, and at the same time we have this part of us that we feel we're so ashamed of, and is, such a big source of ambivalence in our life. And so she was always able to, she was a writer. First of all, she was a poet and a writer. So I think the way she was able to express herself, the kind of contradictions, was so articulate and so real and so raw. And I think, we've all been able to benefit from hearing her express herself.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you definitely handled that with so much care and intentionality. As I was listening to the podcast, it was just the way that you worded things. I could tell there was just such a deep connection and desire to respect not only Alana's legacy, but Alana's family.
Yeah.
And so, just your storytelling skills are incredible, but the way that story was told was so impactful, and I know for sure it's impacted a lot of our viewers. We constantly get comments of, have you listened to Dear Alana? And we're like, yes, we love it, go listen to it. Anybody who hasn't, you have to go listen to it.
Wow.
Curious, what has this project done for you now that it's in the wild, it's been released? I've seen a couple other episodes that you've released since then, but what has it done for you personally now?
Oh my goodness. So many things. I think it, for those who haven't heard the podcast, I'd never met Alana Chen. She was someone that I, obviously only gotten to know after her death. And I feel like this project was a kind of really healing thing for me to be able to revisit my own past, through one of the things that was interesting about making this was my original intention was never to really be that, to really talk about myself that much in it. It was I really originally wanted to be this sort of very neutral observer and documentarian of this person's life. But as I was making it and getting feedback from early listeners, it was clear that a lot of people wanted to know my stakes in this, right? And why I should be the one telling this story, and what connection I have to this. And so almost unwittingly ended up sharing a lot more about my own life and having to dig into my own journals and really having to compare what was happening to Alana with my own story. And so that led to, as you hear, a lot of personal aspects that, involve members of my own family and people that were in my life that I hadn't really thought about for a long time. And I'd say that journey really, even the decision to share my story and sort of publicly out myself in this way, I had, after my 20s in conversion therapy, I put all of that in a vault, and I didn't tell anyone about this. It was sort of embarrassing to me. It felt like a part of my past that it was a secret that I was keeping during conversion therapy, and that I felt like, okay, I'm going to change myself and then sort of come out the other side, straight or quote unquote normal, right, and quote unquote healed. Right. And then I'm going to begin my life at that point as this person that people will get to know. And so there was a secret at the beginning there, and then there was a secret afterwards where it was oh God, this didn't work, and I'm kind of embarrassed that I tried doing this, and that I'm going to try to blend in as much as possible to normal society, and so I'd say that was, this part of my life was always something that was pretty hidden. And so the decision to share it was kind of scary, right? And now that it's out there, and in a way I'm still processing it, but it's been a huge weight off of me, right? And sort of seeing bracing for maybe, I don't know, all the fears that we have in our heads and our bodies whether it's when we come out to people or when we are vulnerable, right? Bracing for maybe the worst case scenarios, and seeing that actually it's not as bad, as I imagined. And in fact, it has been very healing and helpful for a lot of other people to hear this story. And so that's been my own nervous system regulation process, right? Is oh, okay, it's actually okay.
Totally.
And so that's been the gift of making this podcast, in a way, the gift that I'd say Alana gave me, which is she kind of was like, hey, you're gonna, she kind of, in a way, I felt like she invited me to tell her story, but in the process, she was like, let's do a little switcheroo and get you in here as well, so that you can work on some of your things. And so that's been the gift of making the show.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I guess the first person she helped with her story, well, not the first, but one of the first, was you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
She changed your life with her story before. And that's why this piece is so powerful. You can tell how much you're in connection with it. And that's why you were the right person to tell the story, because it's a piece of your story too. You can feel that.
Yeah.
How did you resolve, like, what is your faith journey like now and your sexuality? Where have you landed on your sexuality and your faith?
Wow, that's a big question. Yeah, so in a way, working through this kind of conflict, in what I felt was a conflict between my faith and sexuality for so many years. It's gone through stages and phases, right? Where I think maybe at the beginning it was kind of denial, and then it was, well, this is something that is so shameful, and I'm going to, do my best to root it out and get rid of it, right? That being my sexuality. And then it kind of, it hit a point where I, that wasn't working, and I was going into really dark depression, and not really sure why. And I think that really, in a way, was a rock bottom moment that opened up the possibility, in a way, out of survival, to like consider other ways of relating to my sexuality, vis-a-vis my faith, and in a way that began a process of, reevaluating a lot of my presuppositions or things that I felt like were essential to what it meant to be Christian, right? What it meant to believe, what it meant to have this relationship with God, and I think that this is maybe a kind of journey that a lot of us go through, whether it's issues with orientation or sexuality, or whether it's any kind of failure, right, that we might experience in our lives that sort of doesn't work against the narrative. It doesn't go according to the narrative that we are so desperately trying to mold our lives, around. And that, that failure is so humbling. It's kind of a mini death in many ways that leads to, a new openness around considering what God can be, relating to God could be like. And I'm still in that space in many ways. I'm still in that space of discovering how to, sort through all of the ways in which I had been taught, all of the sort of, narratives that I'd been given around what it means to be Christian, and what my experiences have been, right? What my experience around trying so hard to follow a certain kind of set of guidelines or rules, failing at that, and now questioning whether or not that was really the point to begin with, right? So I'd say that's kind of the space I'm in right now.
That's where I'm at too, honestly. It's the openness, it's the rigidity we used to look at things from, and the rigidity that we've seen lead people down some not so healthy paths. And you have to take a step back from rigidity when you see some of the results and the fruit of it. Yeah.
I literally just saw a quote from, and you had Dr. Hillary McBride on the podcast, but she said, spiritual trauma is when you believe it's so good to believe that you're so bad. Yep. And I'm like, oh, that's like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. So you basically came out through the podcast, is that right? Or did you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, kind of. I had been out, to various folks in different phases, right? I think my first coming out was like, hey, mom and dad, I'm same-sex attracted, but I'm going to change. And here's this Exodus conference. And we actually went to one together, and, I kind of dragged them to it. And that was, I think, actually a really interesting facet about both Alana's story and my own is that she and I both kind of like actively chose, quote unquote, to pursue conversion therapy. It wasn't something that, you know, her parents knew about. My parents, you know, kind of found out after the fact. And so it was kind of like we were just like really into it in many ways. And so I think that unlike maybe some of the traditional public, you know, popular stories of conversion therapy where young people are dragged into it against their will, this was not that kind of story. And I think is also why, you know, the perspective that she brought and that I bring to it is a little bit unique. But yeah, I'd say my first kind of phase of coming out was like to my parents and to other maybe close friends was more or less like, hey, I'm going to change and here's how I'm going to do it. And then, you know, the second phase was to a more even, you know, another small circle of people, which was, hey, like I'm, you know, this hasn't been working and I'm kind of, you know, going to either, you know, explore dating or other, you know, just this is no longer a real part of what it means for me to be same-sex attracted, you know. And then I think the third phase was really the podcast, where it was very, very public and sharing the kind of journey of getting to this point. And a lot of people in my life were very shocked. They had no idea that I had been doing this and that this was part of my story. So yeah, I'd say the podcast was probably the big watershed moment of coming out.
Yeah.
Man,
Dang.
Cheers to outing yourself on podcasts.
Yeah, that's
also, I think your big reveal was online, and mine was on TikTok. So,
Really?
Wow, we
that's
have that
right.
in common. Yeah. Why not make it big, you know? How about just like 10 people and then just do 1 million? You know, just go from like 10 people that know to 1 million, and that's fun.
that makes sense.
That's very gay. That's a very gay thing to do. Crank the drama up real high, real fast.
Yeah, I think I saw this funny tweet. It was something like, you know, gay people are like, you know, I'm gonna hold the secret for 10 years and then like here, you know, and then it's like, you know, everything about my life after this point. Like, we're just gonna like go extra.
And not everything.
And then you're JoJo Siwa.
Because then we have to let it all out, and then it just comes out with a bang. I know. That's something you really have to moderate. Like, how do I hold some stuff back now that I've held everything and finally let stuff free? And now I'm like, oh, I gotta reel it back in just a little bit. I've gone too far. That's a real problem I have. I don't know if you have. That's just me. That's just
a Nate problem. It's not a gay problem.
I suppress a lot.
I think we're learning.
Oh man. We'll learn.
Oh man. So okay, you basically come out to millions of people like we're saying, and you expect the feedback to be maybe negative, but in fact you've literally have changed millions of lives, probably like who knows how many,
maybe 4 million.
Yeah, probably 4 million. And you have saved lives, honestly, through this podcast. And
oh my god,
I'm just curious, what do you think, having been so intimately involved with Alana's family and her journals and, you know, in her home where she grew up, I'm just curious, what do you think Alana would have thought of this podcast that you made?
Well, I'm in continuous dialogue with her, and I know that sounds a little strange, but it was something that was part of the process of making it and continues to this day, right? Where I was always like, oh my goodness, like, am I first of all finding all the facts, right? Is this the right, you know, am I getting it right? Was always at the top of my mind. And I really hope that I really can only hope that she feels accurately represented. You know, I've had a lot of people that grew up with her and knew her, and, you know, family and friends really share how much the podcast has meant to them and how much they felt like captured her spirit. But yeah, I would say I think she would find it really gratifying to know that her story is helping people, because it is like you'd said, it is. You know, I've gotten hundreds of notes and emails and DMs. It's something that has resonated with so many people. People have people have come out to their families after hearing the podcast, and people have just really related to her, and I mean, who can't, right? She's so vulnerable and so real, and I think speaks to anyone trying to make sense of what it means to grow up today, right? She was a decade younger than me, but she was very much a person of her time, and on her phone, and just like all the things, and so because of how relatable she is, I think that a lot of people just have been helped by her honesty, and her honesty in front of her struggles, right? Like her ability to articulate the kind of the weird contradictions of like being told that you're loved and that people love you, and that this community loves her, and at the same time being told that there's this aspect of her life that makes it really hard for her to be able to be part of it, and she felt that contradiction. She felt the contradiction of being told that this part of her sexuality was like no big deal, just like any other kind of struggle that anyone might deal with, but at the same time it was something that could lead her to eternal damnation. So it was like, wait, what is this? Like, is it a big deal or not a big deal, right? And the fact that she was wrestling with these things in her writings and able to express them in such a clear way has been really helpful to people. So I think she would be, it's bittersweet, but I think she would be glad at least that other people are benefiting. Absolutely. Yeah.
I totally agree.
I feel that 100%. I mean, the spirit of the podcast is very much, I don't know, it feels, the way she talks, the way she speaks, it feels like this is an extension of her. And I think you did that really well, because you, in a lot of ways, are in her head, because this is going on in your head. And you also, I feel like she'd be honored to have you articulating this, because you also are someone that articulates well and shares a good mixture of head and heart. And I think that's really beautiful. Following her journey, what are the pieces that stuck out to you the most? What are the lessons that were most profound from you, for you, from her journey?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think Alana, like a lot of us, really, really wrestled with how to be lovable, and how to be a good person, how to be a good kid. She was always a good kid. This was something that her family was. She was the only one among her siblings who really for whom church really stuck, right? Her family wasn't particularly devout, and she kind of fell into through a summer camp and found God, and but at the same time she wrestled with a lot of self-criticism and self-loathing and perfectionism, and that was something that I felt like, I mean, I could very much relate to, and I think we all can, right? Which is this idea that we are, trying so hard to find belonging, whether that's belonging with God, belonging within a community, and trying to really regulate our actions and our behavior and all of that to sort of match and lead to that kind of sense of acceptability and belonging. And I think that, as she grows up through her writing, we start to see her start to come to, some compassion and acceptance of herself, right? This is something, Dear Alana is a line from a letter that she writes to herself, that I shared in the first episode. And she writes this letter where she is like pointing out things that she wasn't able to see about herself before. And it's really, really beautiful. And I think like that whole journey is like so fraught and so hard in many ways, is the like task of growing up, but it's rare to find someone, be so honest about it. And so I think like, her story is one about, in a way, of self-acceptance, with the like through the unique lens of, through the unique lens of being Christian in America in the 21st century, right? Like, which has its like unique kind of blend of kind of pop psychology, culture wars. There's all these kind of dynamics that are in play that we see, that she bumps into, that she kind of probably isn't even aware of in the moment. That is kind of the context of her formation and her faith. And I think like her story really points out how challenging it can be for a developing psyche to find safety and, you know, a sense of you know, for faith to remain intact while other parts of you can also remain intact. Like it's really challenging.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd say her story really, I mean, one aspect of her story is the fact that it is a real snapshot of a particular moment in history of how, you know, someone finds God and the kind of follow-on consequences of that, you know, when living in community.
Yeah, man. No, you're so right. And I know we keep saying it, but you just did such a good job in representing that. And
Thank you.
Maybe we had you on the podcast just to tell you thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's really what it's coming down to.
Well, I'm curious about what, like, maybe for each of you, like what you took away from it, or like what were some of the most impactful moments maybe that made you cry, or what resonated with you?
Yeah, I think for me, so it came up on I listened to a podcast on Apple Podcasts, and I saw the little cover and it just like intrigued me. So I clicked on it and I read the description and I was like, okay, I'm going to need like 3 days to recover from listening to this. And then I subscribed, of course, to Tenderfoot because I wanted all the podcasts. So I think what it did for me was just like made me realize that I wasn't alone. And honestly, really what impacted me was when her journal entries would be read, I was literally felt like that was me. Like those were my journal entries. And it just kind of coincided right when I was moving and I was, you know, packing up and finding things, and you read things that you found, and it just hit me in the heart so poignantly, because right before that I was really considering going to conversion therapy because I just felt like there was something so broken about me, and I had a really really bad experience with this religious group of people, and it just made me feel like there's just something so internally damaged about me that I need help. And obviously being myself isn't working, and kind of, you know, living in this weird like half in the closet, half out of the closet isn't working either. So obviously I need spiritual help that's above me. And so that's kind of when Nate and I met, oddly enough. And honestly, like Simon, just like the way that you tell Alana's story is so relatable, and it's so Alana, you know, like you feel the essence of Alana in it, and you find yourself in it too. And so every person I've recommended the podcast to, they can find themselves somewhere in that story, whether it's the mom, whether it's a sister, whether it's, you know, yourself, your own story. Like, that was a lot of rambling.
No, it was good. I think, I don't know what to say after, honestly. She intellectualized it so heavily she's a very intelligent girl, very much thinking about all the angles. And for me, I am someone that's constantly in my head. I am constantly thinking through. So I had built this intricate like idea. I was like doing all the numbers basically of how, okay, if I'm gay but I do this, maybe I won't be. If I'm gay I do this, maybe I won't be. God wants this but he doesn't want this. This is okay, this is not okay. Like I'm just doing like all the numbers in my head. And I felt like a crazy person, because it's like your whole life is an algebra problem with no solution. And I just felt like there's no way I could ever get to a result. Like I'm trying everything. It's like the people giving you the problem know there's no solution, or just like, but just keep working on it, you'll figure it out.
That's a great analogy. Yes.
The process is like essentially designed to be maddening. And when I finally got to the end of it, and finally saw a little crack in Christianity, and saw that maybe it's not a perfect way of, like, the American Christianity is not a perfect whatever. And then I open it up and I'm like, oh, there's no solution to this problem. the reason I can't find a solution after 15 years of trying every day is because the solution they're giving me is wrong, and they're telling me I'm wrong for not implementing the solution right, when there's millions of people out there that are just like me. So her story resonated that so well, because I'm just like, oh my God, she's in the middle of that searching, that finding. Like I felt that pain again of just like, I just have to find this one solution. I just have to do this one more thing, and maybe I'll be acceptable. Maybe I'll be okay. Maybe I'll be good. And the highs of like, oh, maybe I've changed, to the lows of, no, I actually have not changed. I still like the same gender. Maybe I could have hope of finding a relationship, or maybe I can never, because I'm like, the pain is so, you never escape that pain fully after going on this journey. And so when you hear a story like this, that's so very real, I felt that little pain inside my heart that was just so devastated about how wrong and defective I was.
Yeah.
So I just was sobbing at work on that piece in particular. Like, there's something wrong with me. I can't fix it. And no one can help me. And
yeah,
that there's nothing deeper than that pain. And your podcast told that story. Alana so well told that story that anyone in our journey is gonna feel that ache.
Yeah, and I think something that you pointed there is like, the pain gets so deep and so real, and it feels inescapable, that if we're all being really transparent and honest, like, we've probably thought about suicide as a way out, and like, it's not something that anybody has really talked about, because you go through these religious groups, conversion therapy, and it's the idea of you can change, but nobody ever addresses like, what if I leave feeling like I didn't, and like, what's my other way out? And I have not heard any pastors address suicide within the gay community.
No one's talking about it.
And I think this podcast is probably the first piece of content and story that I've seen out there that addresses it very poignantly. So yeah,
because like the statistics for youth in faith that are gay, like the chance of suicide is, I think, double if they're in a like affirming non-religious home. But no one in the church talks about it. No one told me about this. And we are technically, if they do believe all these things so heavily, like, we can change, but they know we're at risk, why aren't they at least like putting us in like very, I don't know, like taking care of us? Like, if you do, or if you're so strong on your faith that like we can change, but that like we're twice as likely to commit suicide, where is the nurturing and love in the community that's going to protect those people if you do have those beliefs so firmly ingrained inside your theology?
Yeah, it's really, really sad, and like the darkness that you describe, like I'm sure we can all think of moments. I have my memory of moments where I was sobbing. I was putting together an IKEA bed, IKEA couch, in an apartment by myself.
That makes me sob too, honestly.
Isn't that so sad? Putting together IKEA furniture by yourself. But the kind of like the kind of darkness that we can descend into out of hopelessness, because of the way it's been set up to, we have all these presuppositions about what life should look like and what it means to be a good Christian, and when that doesn't happen for whatever reason, or can't happen, not because of a lack of trying or desire to change, it's you know what I mean. I think we weren't a lot for a lot of us. It wasn't like we were like, F that, like, no, it was like, I want that. I want what you are telling me is the point of my life. You know what I mean? And when that can't happen for whatever reason, it leaves a crater in your soul in a way that is so dark, and the tears can come from this place that is so deep. And so I think, like, to not to put any of this lightly, right? Like, we are so lucky to be in places now where maybe we are not in that same, place of the crater, but it is so dark. And like you said, like, who's offering to help, right? Who's offering to pull us out of that? Who's there to, for many people, it ends in tragedy because they can't find a way out of that feeling. And so it is such a serious topic. And I think it was another thing that when I was making the podcast was I felt like, this was a part of my history that I was willing to let go and leave behind. But when I saw Alana's story, when I read about, the outlines of her life, I felt like, okay, it's one thing for this to have happened to me, you know what I mean? And I can pull myself together, so to speak, maybe. But when you see it happen to another person, it's like, oh wow, like this is bigger. This is not just a one-off thing that I went through. This is affecting real lives, the theology and the pastoral approaches and the kind of therapeutic advice that are often in our communities is actually endangering lives. And that, it took me a while for me to see that, the seriousness of that, because I think I had rationalized and had wanted to believe that I was not a victim. I was not a statistic. I was different. I was, an exception to all of this. But to when you see the seriousness of this through the eyes of another person, that's when I felt, the stakes, of this story that maybe before that I hadn't really fully grasped. And, putting aside politics, putting aside all of the ways in which we can reduce these topics to talking points or whatever, at the end of the day, you're dealing with people's real lives and experiences, and that's kind of what we have to remember. And
it's the life, and then it's the family's life, it's the friends' lives. Just goes so much further.
It's easy to, when it's just you, I can relate so much to that because I'm a pretty stubborn person. I'm like, I can do this. I can just power through it. I think our family's like self-sacrificial. Like, we know that we give up things a lot for religion. We give up a lot of ourselves. Like, it was always part of our creed as a pastor's family. And you're like, you'll put a certain amount of abuse on yourself and not feel bad, because I think that's humanity. Like, a lot of us are just like, well, I deserve bad things. I'm a problem. When you put that onto someone else and you imagine someone else going through that, like in the case of like, even like me feeling for you, or me feeling for Susie, or me feeling for Alana, like I have way more grace for you guys than for myself. And I think that's a lot of what happens for queer people. Like, in the church, we're kind of focused on our own journey. We're not talking to a lot of other people. Often we're not really meeting a lot of queer people because you kind of avoid them in the Christian spaces. And so you're just on this journey by yourself. You're isolated. And I think hearing other people's stories, when you're kind of, I've heard it a lot of times, that's when it kind of snaps you out of it and think like, oh, if I see someone else going through this, I realize this is actually a really not okay thing, and there needs to be something changed. And I think that's kind of a piece of what's changing in this generation, where we do have more information. We're talking to each other. We're opening up our stories. And that's why what you're doing is really important, because we know it's not just us. There are so many of us that are going through this exact same story with slight variations. And like, we have to, there is not everybody, but we have to fight for change. We have to fight for better, not just for ourselves. We need it for ourselves, but we have to, I think, being empowered to know that we're helping other people when we're doing this. It's not about ourselves. It's about all the other people on this journey with us. And the more we open up all these pieces, the more we're going to be honestly saving lives just by telling stories. Like, it's something that is so heavy on my heart now, because I've just seen so many stories where the little things like this, little things like your project, can make the difference in someone's life.
Yeah, I mean, what I hear in all of that is like the role that shame plays in isolating us from each other, right? And keeping us in our heads and not sharing our honest experiences because we're ashamed. We're ashamed of what that says about us, what other people might think. We're afraid of what it means, to our souls, and if we're admitting kind of the things that we're going through. And I think, I was talking to a person who really has researched and has spoken with, thousands of conversion therapy survivors and others in that space. And he says it takes people on average like a decade to even feel ready to admit that was something that they had been doing. And you have to ask why, right? And I think like you said, maybe we're at a point now where enough of us have gone through the sort of full, we've tasted the full menu of what was on offer as far as how we're supposed to work on our sexuality. Yeah. And we're just kind of coming back with the Yelp reviews, and we're just like, hey, this didn't work, or this is this had this impact on me. And that is opening up a new stage in the conversation, right, where we can now trade notes, but it takes so much time in a way to get over that not even to get over, to sort of, for the shame maybe to fade a little bit, so that we can even have conversations like this. If you had asked me a decade ago to talk about these things, I would have moved to Russia. I would have run away, and it's how did you know? You're not, you know what I mean? You can't, I would have hid, underground in a bunker for a decade. And I think part of that is because of the amount of shame that I was carrying. And so I think maybe that's an area where maybe even just talking about ways in which that started to lesson in our lives, and how that looked like, and how we were able to find some amount of freedom in this space could be really valuable. And I think one of the ways is for those of us who might have gotten to a point where we feel comfortable sharing our experiences, doing that more openly, and allowing others who might not feel yet ready to do that, to get on a podcast, to listen in secret. And I think that was, if there's anything I want to sort of leave with, my whole, when I was thinking about how to tell the story and how to make the podcast, which was something I'd never done before, I thought about who's the person that I want to hear this podcast? Who's the audience, right? That's a basic question when you're making something, right? For me, the audience first and foremost was other little Alanas, other little Simons out there who are, maybe in their communities, in their church and religious communities and spaces, everything's looking great on the outside, but inside they're just desperate and afraid and so fearful about what the future will look like for them, and are maybe going to discover this podcast under the covers, listening to it in secret in their bedrooms. That's who I was making this for. It was for people that are in those spaces who love God and want so desperately to be someone else and change. I think that informed every choice and every way I told this story. And, other people have since listened to it and have found, like you said, connections and ways to relate to the story, because it's a powerful one. But my primary audience was always those people. And I hope those people continue to find it and feel heard and seen through the storytelling and through Alana's own words.
Yeah, and you crushed it. I personally, as I was listening, I was like, I feel like I see so much of myself in Alana, but I also feel like I could be her friend. Yeah. And I think part of it, like you said, I could see myself a few years ago listening to this secretly, hoping nobody would walk in. So you did it justice times, a bajillion.
Yeah. It's a really important project, and we thank you for putting it out. I think everything we're digging into, I'm just thinking, if we could have made this story happen different, I think it would have been having more people around that were there for the journey, having more people around that were able to like be there when she needed it and have these conversations and get away from the super binary thinking of like you're wrong or it's good or it's bad, and bring in some of like God's grace and hey, there's
a lot of gray.
There's a lot of gray area, and there's just real, and like, gosh, the tension we all feel, the like heightened tension of like, gotta solve this, gotta figure this out. Like, I just like, for anybody watching this, I just want you to know, like, there are so many people that really are going through the same thing, that have your back, that would love to be reached out to if there's something in you that, like, if you have anyone in your life that you feel like you can be safe to reach out to about these topics, if you're going through anything, they're there for you. I'm sure there will be, or message us. I'm sure you can message Simon, but just know, like, there's God, there's so much beauty in life that it's so, I know how dark it gets because we've all three of us have been in those situations, but just know like how beautiful life is. And I don't know.
There's just so much more.
You guys want to say on that? Sorry, I just felt like I don't want to like leave this episode, dig into this stuff without saying something, I guess.
I think that you're not alone, and it's okay to have this not figured out. It's okay to have all of the questions and all of the theology kind of, firing back and forth, and really like to feel the like conflict between what you feel is right and what God wants for you, and what you also want and desire for yourself. And it's okay to not have it all resolved, because there are so many of us who are in the same spot, and who are here for you, and like, I'm trying to find the words, and maybe this was, the podcast was the long form way of doing it, but in a short form way, I'm trying to find the words to say to someone that you're fundamentally, you're not alone, even if you feel like you can't relate to us because we're out in some way, like if that somehow disqualifies us from being people in your life that you can trust, know that I think each of us are people who understand your perspective, because we also are people that are the church kids that really knew all the, quote, had all the answers, and that we're not trying to threaten that sense of stability or certainty in your life, and this is not aimed at destroying religion or the church, right? This is really trying to help each of us thrive in our lives within church communities and church spaces, but like, I'm just trying to like somehow like have that person feel like they can relate and can be seen, and even if the points of theology might differ at some points, like that this is a safe place, and to ask questions. And so I that's kind of I wish if there was a way to say that, that's kind of where I'm at.
Thank you so much for taking time and being with us, and thank you for making that project. Dear Alana literally, I think, changed both of our lives. So
absolutely, really thank you for that. I think it's important. It's just an important piece.
Yeah, no, seriously.
Thank you.
If you're, you can find it on Spotify, YouTube. I think it's on a couple different platforms. Mm-hmm. And you also have some other projects coming up that are still, on the DL, but keep an eye on Simon Kent Fung. I think he's going to have some pretty cool stuff
where can people follow you?
Well, you can find me on Instagram and Twitter. I'm not very active on those channels. I'm kind of in monk mode right now, just kind of making things. But I'd say the best way to reach me and find me is just through dearalana.com. That's the website where you can learn more about the project, learn more about Alana, and you can find my socials and ways to reach me there as well.
Well, keep an eye out on Simon, because seriously, it just feels like there's like something special on whatever you do. So I'm sure the next project is going to kick ass too.
Indeed.
Thank you. Thanks so much, both.
Thank you for joining us, and we're really really happy we had this interview, and hopefully this was touching for you. And check out that podcast. Honestly, like you'll have some tissues ready, because it's a ride. And yeah, so I guess you can subscribe on our channel. We have a Patreon. We're doing video chats on there once a month on Thursdays. We're doing one, I think, next week. And then also we have a Discord where you can just chat with other people, and that's totally free if you just want to jump on there. But I guess that's it for this episode. Thank you, and have a great day.
Week.